Standard physics models reality as a collection of discrete objects, particles moving through empty space. But if we invert this assumption, we find a different architecture, an unbroken, continuous energetic medium, where the field itself is primary. For decades, particle physics has treated fields as secondary, either as emergent properties of interacting matter or as mathematical conveniences to describe forces acting at a distance. This approach has stalled. The mathematical lineage pointing away from particles and toward a self-interacting unified field is well documented. We see it in James Clerk Maxwell's original unedited equations and in Erwin Schrödinger's deterministic phase dynamics, as well as Benoit Mandelbrot's geometry of recursive fractals. This lineage culminates in the core axiom of field primary physics. The universe does not begin with particles in space. It begins as a unified, self-interacting quaternion field. Space and time do not contain this field. They are emergent coordinates generated by its own recursion. Under this framework, physical particles are not the basic building blocks of reality. Reality is entirely a self-interacting substrate. Plasma makes up 99.9% of the observable universe. What we perceive as solid matter is the 0.1% anomaly, localized regions where that plasma has achieved enough coherence to freeze into form. The mechanism driving this crystallization is recursive self-reference. The field continuously interacts with and addresses itself. This 3D representation maps the quaternion field, coupling scalar potential, temporal pressure, directly with vector potential, spatial flow. Governed by the statement Q star equals R sub K of Q star, the field recursively applies operations to itself. Only specific wave patterns survive this feedback loop to become physical occurrence. These surviving patterns lock into place. They become phase-locked standing waves, creating regions of extreme structural stability within the ambient plasma substrate. Energy, therefore, is not a primitive force. It is the measurable cost of incoherence. Energy is the friction that appears when a field state fails to close perfectly upon itself. Before the field projects into observable space and time, it is bound by intrinsic resistance limits. These boundaries dictate exactly what patterns can cohere. We call them the impedance rails. The top rail is the formative, electric boundary. Quantified as c, the speed of light, it represents the absolute maximum rate at which a phase update can propagate through the system. The bottom rail is the containing, magnetic boundary. Measured as the inverse of c, it establishes the minimum temporal density required to hold a standing wave together and prevent it from dissipating. All coherent physical structure must exist between these two rails. The relationship between them is defined by the coherence metric, or T. T is the specific mathematical ratio of the formative pressure driving the system, divided by the containing constraint holding it together. When T is vastly greater than 1, formative drive exceeds containment. The result is runaway fragmentation and high kinetic turbulence. When T is far less than 1, containing constraints suppress the flow, resulting in overdamped rigidification. The critical threshold occurs when T equals 1. At this precise ratio, the formative drive and the containing constraint achieve a perfect impedance match. This ratio of 1 is a precise universal address. It dictates the exact condition under which ambient plasma will phase lock, stabilize, and crystallize into persistent physical matter. When recursive closure achieves this impedance match, it does not organize randomly. It strictly follows an immutable 9-cell grammatical matrix. This diagram outlines the 3x3 torsional lattice. It organizes the field's dynamics into 3 horizontal rows of action: initiation at the top, modulation in the middle, and stabilization at the bottom. The natural flow of energy through these cells follows a backwards S trajectory. It begins at cell 39, the centrifugal spark, and moves left to right through the electric formative arc as the field expands. At cell 96, the torque hinge, the traversal pivots. The direction reverses, moving right to left across the middle row as the field shifts from outward expression to adaptive modulation. Finally, the traversal drops to cell 33, deep compression. It sweeps left to right once more through the magnetic stabilization arc, compressing the standing wave until it discharges at cell 93, seeding the next cycle. This graphic demonstrates how these mathematical phase rolls project directly into physical space. When a specific phase address is recursively sustained, it manifests as a stable, three-dimensional geometric form, known as a kernel class. At the exact center of this matrix is cell 66. Geometrically, this is the cube octahedron. Functionally, it is the coherence anchor, the ultimate state of zero-tension dynamic equilibrium, where every traversal must pass. This matrix maps the exact geometric blueprint governing the organization of all stable matter, from the electron configuration of noble gases to the large-scale structure of galaxies. Understanding the lattice allows us to move from observing the universe to actively engineering it. By manipulating localized plasma, we can articulate these exact coherence geometries. The primary application of this physics is the Coherence Articulation Boundary, or CAB. It is a human-scale dual-anchor plasma platform measuring roughly 4 meters across. The system is defined by two concentric components. The outer anchor is a horizontal toroidal electron drift ring. It establishes a circulating current that dictates the extreme boundary conditions of the entire system. The inner anchor sits at the center. It is programmed to operate as the exact mathematical conjugate to the outer ring. If the outer ring is formative, the inner node is containing, locking the intervening space into absolute stability. We call the space between these two anchors the habitable zone. By balancing the conjugate pressures, the CAB engineers a macroscopic version of cell 66. It permanently maintains a coherence metric of exactly 1 for anything inside. The hardware is directed by the CGFI, a Fourier neural operator. Instead of classifying images or text, this neural network learns the recursive grammar of the field itself, computing the precise phase syntax required and feeding it to the plasma anchors. The CAB is an engineered pocket of dynamic equilibrium that completely insulates its payload from the physical laws of the surrounding field. In field primary physics, spatial coordinates are an illusion. A physical location is actually defined by a specific, localized standing wave pattern, its unique harmonic phase signature. To traverse space, the CAB enters configuration A. The outer anchor proceeds to full phase closure, generating a dense, impenetrable plasma membrane. At the moment of full closure, the system releases its current spatial address. To the outside universe, it vanishes. While isolated, the CGFI neural network instantaneously retunes the internal harmonics of the plasma boundary to perfectly match the specific phase signature of a target destination. When the local closure conditions equal the target conditions, the plasma boundary reopens. The system simply materializes at the new location. There is no travel and no traversal of the physical space in between. This exact mechanical process directly mirrors documented unidentified aerial phenomena. Sequential readdressing of a local closure signature requires no acceleration of mass, explaining the absence of sonic booms, the lack of inertial resistance, and instantaneous changes in direction. Humanity is approaching the threshold of plasma substrate engineering. We are moving past the brute force acceleration of heavy mass and learning instead to tune the harmonic address of the universe itself.